The lawyer smiled when he read the last sentence. Not a warm smile, not the kind people use when they are trying to comfort a grieving family. It was small, controlled, almost sad. And the moment those words left his mouth, the entire room went silent. My brother stopped tapping his expensive watch against the table. My sister's hand froze halfway to her pearl necklace. My mother-in-law, who had not cried once during the funeral, finally looked afraid. And me? I was sitting at the far end of the conference table, wearing the same black dress I had worn to my father's burial that morning, trying not to let anyone see my hands shaking under the table. Because until that sentence, everyone in the room thought I had lost. My father's house had gone to my brother. His investment accounts had gone to my sister. The lake cabin had gone to my stepmother. Even his antique car collection, the one I helped him restore every summer when I was a teenager, had been handed to my brother's teenage son, who didn't even know how to change a tire. And I had received one thing, a sealed cardboard box. No property, no money, no shares, just a box. My brother laughed when the lawyer placed it in front of me. "Dad always did have a sense of humor," he said. My sister covered her mouth, pretending to cough. My stepmother looked at me with that soft, poisonous smile she had perfected over 20 years. "Well," she said, "at least he remembered you." That was the moment I almost stood up and walked out, but then the lawyer turned the final page. He adjusted his glasses, and he read the last sentence of my father's will. "If anyone in this room attempts to challenge what I have left to Claire, they will immediately forfeit everything I have given them." No one moved. Then he added quietly, "There is a second document." My brother leaned forward. "What second document?" The lawyer looked at him. "The one your father instructed me to open only after all of you laughed at her." That was when I realized my father had known. He had known exactly who they were. And maybe somehow he had known who I was becoming too. I did not say anything, not because I was weak, not because I was shocked, but because for the first time in my life, I had the advantage. And everyone who had spent years treating me like the family disappointment had just walked into a room my father had built like a trap. My name is Claire Donovan, and this is the story of how my family tried to erase me from my father's legacy, only to discover I was the legacy. The funeral had been beautiful in the way expensive funerals are beautiful. White roses, polished wood, soft violin music playing from hidden speakers. People in tailored black coats whispering about what a great man my father had been, though most of them had not called him in years. My father, Thomas Donovan, had built Donovan Precision Systems from a rented garage into a company that supplied parts to hospitals, aerospace firms, and defense contractors. To the outside world, he was disciplined, brilliant, generous. To me, he was the man who taught me how to hold a wrench before he taught me how to ride a bike. He smelled like engine oil, cedar soap, and coffee. He believed people revealed themselves in two places: when money was on the table and when no one important was watching. I used to think that was just one of his old sayings. By the end of the week, I would understand he had been warning me. At the cemetery, my brother Nathan stood in front of everyone and gave a speech about legacy. He used that word 7 times, legacy. He spoke about sacrifice, leadership, family duty. He even placed one hand on the casket and said, "Dad taught me everything I know." That was the first lie of the day. My father had tried to teach Nathan many things. Nathan had simply never been interested unless there was applause attached. Nathan liked the title, The Office, the photograph in business magazines. He liked the feeling of walking into a room and having people already know his last name. But the actual work, the long nights, the failures, the machines that broke down at 2 a.m., that was never Nathan. That was me. When I was 19, I spent my summer rebuilding a calibration system that everyone else had given up on. My father gave me a notebook, a key to the East workshop, and one instruction: don't tell your brother until it works. When it finally did work, Nathan presented it to the board. I sat in the back of the room with grease under my fingernails while they applauded him. That was how my family worked. Nathan performed. My sister Rebecca smiled, my stepmother Vivian managed appearances, and I disappeared. After the funeral, we drove to the law office in separate cars. That told you everything. Nathan arrived in his black Mercedes. Rebecca came in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Vivian arrived last, wearing sunglasses, even though the sky was grey and dead flat. I came alone. No husband, no children, no dramatic support system, just me and the silence my father had left behind. The law office belonged to Mr. Graham, my father's attorney for almost 30 years. He was a thin man with silver hair, careful hands, and the kind of face that made people lower their voices around him. He shook everyone's hand. When he reached me, he held mine a second longer. "I'm sorry, Claire," he said. "Not for your loss, not the standard phrase, just, 'I'm sorry.' At the time, I thought he meant my father. Later, I realized he meant everything else. The conference room was cold, too cold, the kind of cold that makes grief feel administrative. Nathan sat at the head of the table, though no one had invited him to. Rebecca sat beside him, already scrolling through her phone. Vivian placed a small tissue in her lap like a prop. I sat at the other end. Mr. Graham opened a leather folder. He began with the formal language: dates, names, witnesses, declarations. I barely heard the first few minutes. My mind kept returning to the last time I saw my father awake. He had been in the hospital, thinner than I had ever seen him, but his eyes were still sharp. I stood beside his bed while machines breathed and clicked around us. He asked me if I was still keeping records. I thought he meant my consulting work. "Yes," I said. His fingers moved against the blanket. "All of them?" I nodded. "All of them." He closed his eyes for a moment, like that answer gave him peace. Then he whispered, "Good girl." Those were the last words he ever said to me. Now, sitting in that conference room, I wondered whether I had failed to understand something important. Mr. Graham read the first distribution. The house went to Nathan. Not just any house, the Donovan house. 7 bedrooms, stone exterior, library with walnut shelves, workshop out back. The place where my father had raised me before Vivian moved in and slowly made every room feel like I was a guest. Nathan tried not to smile. He failed. Rebecca squeezed his arm. Vivian dabbed her eyes with the dry tissue. I stared at the table. Mr. Graham continued. The lake cabin went to Vivian. The investment portfolio was divided between Vivian and Rebecca. The antique cars went to Nathan's son, Caleb. Company voting rights went to Nathan. That part made my stomach twist. I had expected it, but expecting a slap does not make it painless. Donovan Precision Systems had been my father's life and mine, though no one in my family said that out loud. I had left the company 5 years earlier after Nathan publicly humiliated me in a board meeting. He had called my proposal emotional, then presented the same plan 3 months later as his own. When I confronted him, Vivian told me I was being difficult. Rebecca said, "Claire, not everything is about credit." My father said nothing. That silence hurt more than Nathan's theft. 2 weeks later, I resigned. Everyone assumed I had failed. What they did not know was that 3 former clients called me before I even packed my desk. Within a year, I had built a quiet consulting firm that fixed the very systems Nathan kept breaking. But I kept it small, private, almost invisible. Not because I was ashamed, because I had learned something from my father. Power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, while loud people underestimate it. Mr. Graham turned another page. "And to my daughter, Claire Donovan," he said. The room shifted. Nathan looked up. Rebecca finally stopped scrolling. Vivian tilted her head, curious in that cruel way people get when they expect entertainment. Mr. Graham continued, "I leave the sealed box marked CD, currently held in my attorney's office." He paused. "That is all." For 2 seconds, no one reacted. Then Nathan laughed, not loudly, just enough. A sharp little breath through his nose. Rebecca looked down at the table. Vivian sighed, as though embarrassed for me. "A box," Nathan said. "Well, that's symbolic." I kept my face still. Mr. Graham reached beside his chair and lifted a medium-sized cardboard box onto the table. It was old, not dirty but worn. Brown tape along the edges. My initials written on the top in my father's handwriting. C.D. My throat tightened. Not because of the value, because of the handwriting. The last living movement of my father's hand was sitting in front of me. Nathan leaned back. "Go ahead," he said. "Open it." I looked at Mr. Graham. "Do I have to open it here?" "No," he said gently. "You do not." "Then I'll take it with me." Vivian smiled. "Claire, don't be dramatic. We're all family." That sentence. We're all family. People only said that in our house when they wanted me to accept something unfair quietly. I placed both hands on the box. "I said I'll take it with me." Nathan's expression hardened for half a second. Then the expensive charm returned. "Relax. No one wants your box." Rebecca laughed under her breath. That was when Mr. Graham cleared his throat. "There is one final clause." Nathan waved his hand. "Go on." Mr. Graham turned the last page. I watched his face change. Not much, but enough. He read slowly. "If anyone in this room attempts to challenge what I have left to Claire, they will immediately forfeit everything I have given them." Silence. Absolute silence. Then Nathan sat forward. "What does that mean?" Mr. Graham removed his glasses. "It means exactly what it says." Rebecca frowned. "Why would we challenge a box?" Mr. Graham looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "That would be the question." Vivian's tissue stopped moving. The air in the room changed. Before that sentence, the box had been a joke. After that sentence, it became a threat. Nathan glanced at it, then at me. "What's inside?" I looked at him. "I don't know." "Open it." "No." His jaw tightened. I'm the executor of Dad's estate. No, Mr. Graham said. Everyone turned. Nathan blinked. Excuse me? You are not the executor, Mr. Graham said. Nathan's face reddened. That's impossible. Your father appointed me as independent executor. Vivian sat straighter. Thomas never mentioned that. No, Mr. Graham said. He would not have. Something cold moved through the room. Not grief, fear. Small, early fear. The kind that appears when people realize the ground may not be where they thought it was. Mr. Graham placed the papers in order. There is a second document. Nathan's voice dropped. What second document? Mr. Graham's eyes moved briefly to me. The one your father instructed me to open only after all of you laughed at her. No one spoke. My face burned, not from shame, from the sudden, terrible understanding that my father had seen more than I thought. Every dinner where Nathan interrupted me, every Christmas where Rebecca made jokes about my little projects. Every time Vivian told people I was still finding myself while I was working 70-hour weeks. Every room where I had been made small. He had seen it. Maybe not all at once, maybe too late. But he had seen it. Mr. Graham opened a second envelope. This one was cream-coloured, sealed with red wax. My father's initials were pressed into it. T.D. Nathan stood. I want a copy of that before you read anything. You will receive what you are entitled to receive, Mr. Graham said. I'm his son. Yes, the lawyer said, you are. The words landed harder than they should have, because they sounded like an answer to a question Nathan had not asked. Mr. Graham broke the seal. He unfolded the paper, then he began to read. To my children, my wife, and anyone else present who believes they know the full story of what I built. Rebecca whispered, What is this? Mr. Graham continued, I spent the first half of my life building a company. I spent the second half watching my family mistake possession for ownership. Nathan's face went still. Vivian's lips parted. The lawyer read on. I gave some of you titles. I gave some of you homes. I gave some of you comfort. But there is one person in this room to whom I gave work. My hand tightened on the box. One person who came to the shop when no one praised her. One person who stayed when machines failed. One person who solved problems without asking who would get credit. Rebecca looked at me. For the first time that day, she looked at me as if I had become visible. Mr. Graham continued. I failed that person more than once. I let louder voices take credit for quieter labor. I allowed peace at the dinner table to cost my daughter her dignity. That is my regret. My eyes stung. I looked down. I hated that those words reached me. I hated that I still wanted them. Nathan slammed his palm on the table. This is ridiculous. Mr. Graham did not look up. If Nathan interrupts this reading again, he will be removed from the room. Nathan laughed. You can't remove me. The lawyer finally raised his eyes. Your father gave me that authority too. The room fell silent again. I almost smiled. Almost. Mr. Graham continued. The box I have left to Claire contains 3 things. The first belongs to her past. The second belongs to her future. The third will decide whether this family leaves this room with dignity or lawyers. Vivian whispered, Thomas, what did you do? Mr. Graham kept reading. Claire, I know you will want to leave before opening it. You always were the only one in this family who knew when a room had become unsafe. But this time, Stay. A chill ran over my arms. The words felt too direct, too alive, as if my father were sitting across from me. So stay, the letter continued. Open the box, let them watch. Nathan turned toward me. His voice was lower now. Claire. It was not an apology. It was a warning. For years that tone had worked on me. At birthdays, at board meetings, at family dinners. Claire, don't make this difficult. Claire, don't embarrass us. Claire, let it go. This time I did not let it go. I pulled the box closer. The tape had already been cut. Of course it had. Mr. Graham must have prepared it. Inside was a layer of white tissue paper. I removed it carefully. The first thing I saw was a small metal object wrapped in cloth. I knew what it was before I touched it. The workshop key. The old brass one. The key my father used to wear on a ring clipped to his belt. The key to the east workshop behind the Donovan house. The place where I had learned to build, fix, fail, and try again. My brother laughed quietly. A key? Dad was sentimental after all. I lifted the key. Attached to it was a tag, in my father's handwriting, not the old workshop, the new one. My pulse changed. New one? I looked at Mr. Graham. He nodded once as if to say, keep going. The second item was a folder, thick, blue, labelled with my name, Claire Donovan. Inside were legal documents. I scanned the first page, then the second. Then I stopped breathing. What is it? Rebecca asked. I didn't answer. Nathan reached for the folder. I pulled it back. His eyes narrowed. Claire. I looked at Mr. Graham. What is Donovan Applied Research? The lawyer's expression did not change. A private company your father formed 12 years ago. Nathan's chair scraped the floor. 12 years ago. Mr. Graham nodded. Yes. I've never heard of it. No, the lawyer said. You have not. I looked back down. My name appeared on the documents, not as employee, not as consultant, not as beneficiary, as majority owner. My mouth went dry. That's impossible, I whispered. Mr. Graham spoke gently. Your father created it after the calibration system you developed at 19 was licensed for outside use. Nathan stared at me. Rebecca's face went pale. Vivian slowly lowered her tissue. Mr. Graham continued. Your father placed the licensing revenue into that company. Over time, additional patents and contracts were assigned to it. I could barely follow his words. Patents, contracts, revenue, assigned. All I could see was my signature from years ago on an old development agreement I barely remembered signing because my father had told me it was for internal records. I looked at Nathan. His face had changed completely. He was no longer laughing. What patents? He asked. Mr. Graham turned a page in his own copy. Several core systems currently used by Donovan Precision Systems. The silence after that sentence was different, heavy, dangerous. Nathan's voice became careful. Are you saying she owns company assets? I am saying, Mr. Graham replied, that Donovan Precision Systems has been licensing certain technologies from Donovan Applied Research for nearly a decade. Rebecca whispered. From Claire? Mr. Graham looked at me. Yes. My stomach dropped. For 10 years I had believed my father let Nathan take my work and bury it inside the company. But he had not buried it. He had separated it, protected it. And for reasons I still did not understand, he had never told me. Nathan pointed at the folder. That's not valid. It is. I want those documents reviewed. You may have your attorney review them. I will challenge this. Mr. Graham's eyes sharpened. You may want to reread the final clause of the will before you do. Nathan's mouth closed. There it was, the trap. If he challenged what I received, he risked everything. The house, the voting rights, the status, all of it. My father had left him exactly what he wanted, then made sure greed could take it away. I looked back into the box. There was one more item, a black envelope, smaller than the others. My name was written across it, Claire, just Claire. I picked it up. The paper felt expensive, thick. Inside was a single photograph and a letter. The photograph showed my father standing in front of a building I had never seen. Behind him was a sign, Donovan Applied Research, Harrisburg Facility. My heart started pounding. The new workshop, not a metaphor, not a memory, a real building, a company, a place, a future I had apparently owned without knowing. The letter was short. I unfolded it. Mr. Graham did not read this one aloud. It was meant for me. Claire, if you are reading this, I am gone, and I have finally done something I should have done years ago. I am sorry I let them make you feel small. I told myself I was keeping peace. The truth is uglier. I was weak where you needed me strong. But I was not blind. I saw what you built. I saw what they took. And I made sure the world kept a record. The building is yours. The company is yours. The patents are yours. But be careful. Nathan does not know the company depends on what belongs to you. Vivian knows more than she has ever admitted. And Rebecca signed something she probably never read. Trust Graham. Trust the records. Do not trust the family. I read the last line twice, then a third time. Do not trust the family. My father had underlined it. Nathan's voice cut through the room. What does it say? I folded the letter slowly. It says I need my own attorney. Mr. Graham gave the smallest nod. Vivian stood so abruptly her chair hit the wall behind her. This is cruel, she said. Her voice trembled, but not with grief. This is absolutely cruel. Your father just died and now we're sitting here being accused like criminals. I looked at her. For 20 years, Vivian had controlled rooms with emotion, tears when challenged, silence when cornered, kindness in public, knives in private. But for the first time, the performance did not fill the space. The documents did. Nathan turned on her. What does he mean, you know more? Vivian's eyes flashed. Don't be ridiculous. What do you know? I said, don't be ridiculous. Rebecca pushed back from the table. Why did Dad say I signed something? No one answered. That was the moment I saw it. Not the whole truth, just the shape of it. They were not united. They had never been united. They were only comfortable when I was the one outside the circle. Now the circle had cracked, and each of them was suddenly afraid the others knew something they didn't. Mr. Graham gathered the documents. Claire, he said, your father instructed me to give you access to all company records related to Donovan Applied Research. I recommend we schedule a private meeting as soon as possible. Nathan snapped. She doesn't get company records. Mr. Graham turned to him. She owns the company in question. She owns a shell. No, the lawyer said. A pause. She owns the foundation. The words landed like a physical blow. Nathan looked at me. I could see him calculating. For the first time in my life, my brother was looking at me not as an annoyance, not as a burden, not as the quiet sister who could be pushed aside. He was looking at me as a threat, and I realized something that should have scared me. It didn't. I placed the key, the folder, and the black envelope back into the box. Then I stood. Vivian's voice softened instantly. "Claire, wait!" There it was, the old trick, a gentle tone after the knife failed. "We need to talk as a family," she said. I looked at Nathan, then Rebecca, then Vivian. "No," I said. "We needed to talk as a family years ago." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Maybe real, maybe not. "Claire, we didn't know." I almost believed her. That was the dangerous part, because some part of me still wanted a sister, still wanted someone to say they were sorry without needing something from me. But then I remembered every time she had chosen comfort over truth, every time she had laughed just softly enough to stay innocent, every time she had watched me take the blame because it was easier. I picked up the box. Nathan stepped into my path. "Don't do anything stupid." I looked at him. "You mean like read documents before signing them?" His face darkened. Mr. Graham moved slightly. Not much, just enough to remind Nathan that we were not alone. I walked around him. At the door, I stopped. Not because I wanted to, because Mr. Graham spoke one final time. "Claire?" I turned. He held up another sealed envelope. This one was not to be opened during the reading. My chest tightened. When was it supposed to be opened? He looked past me, at Nathan, at Rebecca, at Vivian, then back at me. "When the first person in your family asks you to give back what your father left you." No one breathed. I looked at the envelope, then at Vivian's pale face, then at Nathan's clenched jaw, and I understood. This wasn't over. It had barely started. I left the room with the box in my arms, my father's key in my coat pocket, and 3 people behind me who had just discovered the woman they buried years ago was still very much alive. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone had already started ringing. Nathan, then Rebecca, then Vivian, then a number I didn't recognize. I ignored all of them. I sat in my car and placed the box on the passenger seat. For a full minute, I did nothing. I just listened to the rain tapping against the windshield. A grey, steady rain. The kind my father used to call thinking weather. Then I opened the folder again. This time, I read slower. Company formation, licensing agreements, patent assignments, revenue statements, board notices. And then, near the back, I found a document that made my blood turn cold. It was dated 5 years earlier, the same month I left Donovan Precision Systems. The title read, "Emergency Transfer Attempt, Rejected." Below it was Nathan's signature, Vivian's signature, and Rebecca's. My hands went numb. They had tried to transfer my company's assets. 5 years ago, they had tried to take it all, and my father had stopped them. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the handwritten note attached to the final page, my father's handwriting. "Claire must never see this until I'm gone. If she sees it too soon, she will forgive them before she protects herself." I sat there, staring at those words. Because he was right. 5 years ago, I would have forgiven them. I would have accepted an explanation. I would have let them call it a misunderstanding. I would have swallowed the pain just to keep a family I never truly had. But not anymore. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Nathan. "We need to fix this before you ruin everything." I stared at the message. Then another one appeared. "You don't understand what Dad did." Then a third. That company can destroy us. I looked at the folder, at the signatures, at the proof, at the key, at the photograph of the building I owned and had never seen. Then I typed back the first message I'd sent my brother in almost 6 months. You're right. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then I sent the second part. I don't understand yet. I placed the phone face down, started the car, and drove toward Harrisburg, toward the new workshop, toward the company my father had hidden from everyone, toward the truth. And behind me, my family began to panic, not because I had taken anything from them, but because for the first time, I was going to read what they had signed. The building looked nothing like I expected. For years, I had imagined some hidden warehouse, a forgotten workshop, a dusty side project my father never finished. Instead, Donovan Applied Research occupied an entire glass and brick complex on the outskirts of Harrisburg. 3 buildings, private security, employee parking lots packed with cars, my company, my father's secret, my inheritance, and somehow my family had spent years trying to take it. I sat in my car for nearly a minute before walking inside, not because I was afraid, because I was trying to understand how a person could hide something this large. The receptionist looked up. The moment she saw me, her expression changed. Recognition, not surprise, recognition. Miss Donovan? My stomach tightened. You know who I am? She smiled. Of course. Of course. 2 simple words, but they hit harder than anything that happened in the lawyer's office, because for most of my life, I had been invisible. At family gatherings, inside the company, at board meetings, at holidays, invisible. Yet here, people knew my name. The receptionist stood. They've been waiting for you. Waiting. Not expecting. Waiting. As if my arrival had always been part of the plan. She led me upstairs, through bright hallways, past laboratories, conference rooms, engineers, researchers, design teams, people working on systems I barely understood. Finally, we entered a large office. 3 people stood when I walked in. A grey-haired woman, a younger man with glasses, and an older engineer whose face seemed strangely familiar. The engineer smiled first. Claire? I stared, then remembered. His name was Walter. 30 years earlier, he worked beside my father in the original garage. I had met him as a child. I hadn't seen him in years. Walter's eyes softened. You look just like him. For a moment, I couldn't answer. The grey-haired woman stepped forward. My name is Susan Bell, Chief Financial Officer. She extended her hand, then said something that made my heart stop. Your father told us this day would come. The room suddenly felt smaller. What do you mean? Susan exchanged a glance with Walter. Then she opened a file. Inside was a letter. Another letter. My father seemed to have left instructions everywhere. Susan handed it to me. The envelope had only 2 words written on it. When she arrives. I sat down. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page. Claire, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And if you are sitting in this office, then you finally know the truth. The company was never meant to be hidden from you forever. It was hidden from everyone else, especially your family. Years ago, I realized something difficult. The people who claimed to love you were beginning to see you as an obstacle. Not a daughter, not a sister, an obstacle. Nathan wanted control, Vivian wanted security, Rebecca wanted approval. and none of them understood the value of what you created. So I protected it, not because I doubted you, because I doubted them. Everything that belongs to Donovan Applied Research belongs to you. But before you make any decisions, read the red folder. I lowered the letter. Where's the red folder? Susan looked uncomfortable. Walter sighed. Then he walked toward a cabinet. Inside sat a thick red binder. The moment I saw it, I knew. This was the real reason my father had hidden everything. I opened the binder, and the first page made my blood run cold. Attempted asset acquisition. Nathan Donovan, Rebecca Donovan, Vivian Donovan. Multiple dates, multiple signatures, multiple attempts, years. Not once, not twice, years. They had been trying to gain access to Donovan Applied Research for almost a decade. Each time they failed, each time my father blocked them. The deeper I read, the worse it became. Fake restructuring proposals, hidden transfer requests, licensing modifications, attempts to gain voting control, everything designed to move ownership away from me, away from the patents, away from the revenue, away from the company. The room became silent. I turned another page, then another. Then I found the document that changed everything. A private memo from my father. Nathan doesn't realize that most of Donovan Precision Systems depends on technology licensed from Claire's company. If ownership is transferred, the licensing agreement automatically terminates. I read the sentence twice, then 3 times. Walter nodded slowly. You understand now. I looked up. If the licensing ends, Susan finished the sentence, Donovan Precision Systems collapses. My stomach dropped. Not weakens, not struggles, collapses. The entire company depended on intellectual property owned by Donovan Applied Research. Owned by me. Suddenly Nathan's text message made sense. That company can destroy us. He wasn't exaggerating. He was terrified. Because for the first time in his life, his future depended on me. 3 days later, the phone calls became desperate. Nathan called 23 times. Rebecca called 17. Vivian stopped calling and started leaving voicemails. The tone changed quickly. At first, there's been a misunderstanding. Then, we should talk. Then, your father wouldn't want this. Finally, please. Funny how quickly people discover humility when they need something. I ignored all of them. Until Friday. Friday was the board meeting, the first board meeting after my father's death. And according to the legal documents, I had every right to attend. The boardroom looked exactly as I remembered. Large table, floor-to-ceiling windows, city skyline, expensive chairs. The same room where Nathan once stole credit for my work. The same room where I was publicly humiliated. The same room where I resigned. Nathan froze when I walked in. Every board member turned. No one spoke. I took a seat. Nathan recovered first. What are you doing here? I placed the folder on the table. Attending? You don't work here. No, I smiled slightly. I own the patents that keep this company alive. Silence. Absolute silence. Board members began exchanging looks. Nathan's face lost colour. For 2 hours, we reviewed financial reports, forecasts, licensing obligations, future contracts. Then we reached the final agenda item, renewal, the licensing agreement. Every eye turned toward me. The room felt heavy. This was the moment, the decision, the moment viewers would ask themselves, what would I do? Would I destroy them? Would I take revenge? Would I burn everything down? I won't pretend I didn't think about it. I did. For years they mocked me, used me, ignored me, took credit for my work, treated me like I didn't matter. One signature could end everything. Nathan knew it too. For the first time in my life, he looked afraid. Not arrogant, not confident, afraid. Then something unexpected happened. I remembered my father, not the businessman, not the strategist, the man who taught me how to solve problems, the man who believed character mattered more than victory. And I realized something. Destroying them would feel good. For a week, maybe a month, but building something better? That would last forever. I stood. Every eye followed me. Then I spoke. The licensing agreement will continue. The entire room exhaled. Nathan nearly collapsed back into his chair, but I wasn't finished. Under new terms. Now everyone was listening. Donovan Applied Research will receive a significantly larger share. No objections. No one was in a position to object. An independent oversight committee will be established. Still silence. And Nathan Donovan will no longer serve as CEO. That landed like a grenade. Nathan stood. You can't do that. The chairman looked at the documents, then looked at Nathan, slowly, carefully. We can. Nathan stared around the room, looking for allies. He found none, because for years people had tolerated him. Now they no longer needed to. The vote passed, unanimously. The golden child had finally run out of protection. The months that followed changed everything. Nathan resigned. Rebecca apologized. A real apology. Not because she wanted something, because she finally understood what she had done. Vivian moved away. The performance ended once people stopped applauding. And me? I inherited something much larger than money. I inherited the truth. The truth that my father had seen everything. The truth that he regretted staying silent. The truth that he spent years trying to protect me in the only way he knew how. 1 year later, I visited his grave. The same cemetery, the same hill, the same quiet wind. I placed my hand on the stone, then smiled. Not because everything had worked out perfectly. It hadn't. Families are complicated. Damage doesn't disappear. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their version of me. The failure, the forgotten daughter, the afterthought. That person was gone. I looked at the sky and laughed softly, because I finally understood why the lawyer smiled when he read the last sentence. It wasn't because my father had won. It wasn't because my family had lost. It was because my father knew something they didn't. The truth always arrives eventually. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it arrives in a sealed box. Sometimes it arrives in a lawyer's office. But sooner or later, it arrives. And when it does, the room becomes very quiet.